Alright, we've got two more sections left in this chapter. Chapter 9.5 is on completing the square. The last couple of chapters have been process oriented. If you've noticed, it means that we've been asked to learn how to complete a series of steps to produce a solution or a result. This section is no different. Today we're going to look at the process of completing the square. The essential question is, what does it mean if I complete the square? The process of completing the square creates a trinomial with an x squared, an x, and a number that would factor into perfect square factors, I guess is what it should say. It would be x plus a number, which would be the same, or x plus that number squared is what it is. Again, it is completing the square because you're trying to find a number that would factor in to make it something squared. It's not a difficult process, but the sequence must be practiced. Sorry, I didn't do that right. So that you are fluent enough to perform it well. And again, it's one of those things where you need to make sure that you take the practice time seriously, because if you don't practice it well, then you're not really going to know how to do it, and you're going to make mistakes when they count. The steps that you need to keep in mind and use on your notes as you practice this is, the first thing you want to do is isolate the x's. Second thing you want to do is create the blanks. On the computer today, your blanks will actually be question marks. Complete the square to figure out what the blanks are, simplify both sides, and then solve. Again, completing the square is the process, or is the name of the chapter, but it's solving by completing the square that we're trying to focus on doing. These steps will make sense again when we put a little bit of experience with it, so let's get a couple things done first. Pretty much completing the square is kind of like this process that we're going to do here, which is finding the value of c that creates a perfect square. And when you do that, the process of creating a perfect square means first thing you would do is you would take this number and cut it in half. So you would take that 4. Second thing you do is take that 4 and square it, which gives you c equal to 16. And that's what you're looking for. Because if you were to factor this, and you would turn it into x plus 4 times x plus 4, you don't need to write this part, but just pay attention. X times x is your x squared, plus 4x makes 8x, and then 4 times 4 makes 16. So again, you take that number, cut it in half, and then square it, and that's what gives you the value of c. Also notice that the sign comes down, and half of that number is what you use. Same thing on the second one. Again, the process has to be practiced. What you do first is you bring down half of that value, which is -2. Then you take that -2 and you square it, which means that c is equal to 4. C should always be positive because it's a negative times a negative, and that's what we're looking at. Again, if you were to look at x minus 2 times x minus 2, that is your x squared. -2x makes -4x, and -2 times -2 makes a positive 4. But again, what you are doing is just finding c. So you're pretty much practicing. This step is the main part of what you need to know how to do today, which is take the number, cut it in half, square it, and then that completes the square. The third example, same thing. Take the -16, cut it in half to be -8. Take that -8 and square it, and remember that it's going to be positive, never negative, so c would be 64, and that is a perfect square trinomial, x squared minus 16x plus 64. And again, trusting that that's going to happen, that's all you need. Now the trick you have to look out for is 3/5. Some of us are kind of stubborn, so you really won't do this. You'll just try to cut it in half your own way, but we don't really know how to cut a fraction in half. Now, mentally, or number sense-wise, to cut a fraction in half, you just double the bottom number. But you, if you're not good with numbers, should just do it the real way, which is, or the way with your calculator, which is 3/5 divided by 2, seeing that you get 3/10. And then you want to take 3/10 and square it. Now again, with number sense, you pretty much square the top and square the bottom. But if you don't know that, you could just simply take 3/10 and square it and see that your answer is 9/100. But again, the process itself is the same. Take the number, cut it in half, take that number, square it, and that is what gives you the perfect square for that. Alright? So now that we know how to find the value, we can actually look at what we do to solve something completely. So again, if you're having issues with what we just did, stop the video, come over, I can show it to you in person, and try at least to get you a better idea of it. But again, you have to make sure you seek that out, because if you're lost right now on what we just did, then this is not going to help. So again, if you need to pause the video and come over and show me that stuff so I can try to talk you through what's going on, or at least gives you a better idea, please do that. But again, solving by completing the square, following those steps that are on your notes. If you look up at your notes where the 1 through 5 is, the first thing it says we have to do is isolate the x's. So the way we isolate the x's is the same way as we did yesterday, or the opposite of what we did yesterday, which is when we moved the numbers towards the x squared. Now we're going to move it away from the x squared. So the first thing you would type in on your Math Excel is this, because it's going to be x squared plus 6x equals 8. Again, notice that my x's are on one side, my numbers on the other side. The second step says create the blanks, and what's going to happen is we are going to create a value on this side to make it a perfect square. But the rules of algebra are pretty basic. They say that whatever you do to one side you must do to the other. So if we're going to add a blank on this side, we have to add the same blank on that side. Again, on Math Excel you put plus question mark, but either way this is where we are. So blank and blank over there is where we go on paper. The third thing you do is you complete the square, and you want to turn this into whatever you need it to be. So remember that we're creating a square. So you're going to have an x, you're going to copy that sign. Remember, we take half of that number and put it here. So again, the process we just did is we took that number, we cut it in half, and then we take that number and we square it and fill in that blank. Well, if I put a 9 in that blank, I also want to put a 9 in that blank, which means that it ends up as 8 plus 9, which is 17. Again, let me go back to this. Take this number, cut it in half, square that number, fill in the blank. Take that number, put it in the other side, and as you simplify, this turns into x plus 3 squared, because that's what we just talked about, how it's going to be x, that sign, and half of that. And then 8 plus 9 turns into 17. Now in terms of algebra, usually we get rid of the number first, but the number's with x, whereas the squared is on the outside. So what you would do is eliminate the square by square rooting both sides, which means you're going to get x plus 3 come down with plus or minus root 17. Now you've never seen the plus or minus, or you haven't seen the plus or minus sign a lot, but what that means is square root of 17 and negative square root 17, which is what you're going to have to type into your computer. But again, what it officially is plus or minus root 17. The next thing you're going to do is split it, because you're going to have to take this, and there's two numbers here. There's a positive 17 and a negative root 17. So you'll do x plus 3 equals root 17, and do x plus 3 equals negative root 17. Last step, of course, is to subtract 3 from both sides. And be careful how you write this, because it's typically better to put the root last. So what we're going to put is negative 3 plus root 17 here. And over here we're going to put negative 3 minus root 17. And those are my two stopping points. Now, if that answer is in decimal form, I could easily take negative 3 plus square root 17 equals, and then convert it, or do whatever I need to do on that. But again, that is your answer on that question. Going back through it real quickly: isolate, create the blanks, figure out what goes in the blanks, square it, that's completing the square, creating a perfect square. Get rid of the square root first. Don't forget, when you square root you get a plus or minus on that number, because 17 is not a perfect number. From there you split it and you solve it the way that it's going. Again, this is a easy process, but it's not a process that you can just learn by looking at it a couple times and having it stick. You're going to have to put some work in, but once you put a little bit of work in, kind of like with the factoring, kind of like with the stuff we've done, I think you'll get it just fine. Here, that should be equal 0, by the way. First thing we want to do is isolate the square, or isolate the x's. So we subtract 41 from both sides, which gives us x squared minus 14x equals negative 41. The second thing we do is we create our blank. So x squared minus 14x plus blank equals negative 41 plus blank. We then need to figure out the blanks and complete the square. So we put x minus 7, again 7 because that's half, squared because we're creating a perfect square. 7 squared turns into 49 here, and 49 there. Negative 41 plus 49 equals 8. From there it's the same thing. Get rid of your squared first because it's on the outside. just don't forget when you bring it down that it is a positive and negative root 8. Alright? Again, what you will type is root 8 comma negative root 8 because there is no plus or minus in the computer. So when you do the computer, you'll actually type in x minus 7 equals root 8 comma negative root 8. It's kind of weird, but it at least makes you remember that you have a positive and a negative value, kind of like you did on the lesson where we had to type in the numbers. Either way, once you get x minus 7 by itself, you now split it. X minus 7 equals root 8. X minus 7 equals negative root 8. And the last thing we do is we move our 7. And remember, you want to put the number first, so it's 7 plus root 8. Just like over here, when you move your 7, it's going to be 7 minus root 8. And those are your two stopping points. Those are your two solutions to what's going on. So go ahead and go to your Math Excel. Again, please start trying to get this down. It's not a hard process to learn, but again, you have to put some work in to do it. I don't think it'll take you a lot. I think I gave you 5 problems of each, which is a 15-question assignment. But again, the first 10 are very quick. And after that, you just have to do this 5 times. But I think that once you've done it 5 times, you probably got the process down. So go ahead and go to Math Excel and let's see what we can do. Good luck.